let's be real for a second. Have you ever wondered why we just keep failing at our goals year after year? You know the exact cycle I'm talking about. January rolls around, you set this massive, life-changing resolution, and you just power through those first few days running on pure willpower. But then, well, life gets in the way, right? By mid-February, that big goal is nothing but a distant, kind of frustrating memory. And what do? We blame ourselves. We blame our lack of discipline. Or we tell ourselves, I guess I just didn't want it badly enough. But what if the problem isn't actually you? What if the real reason you keep failing has absolutely nothing to do with your willpower and everything to do with a fundamental flaw in how you're approaching change in the first place?
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are going to radically alter the way you view self-improvement. We're going to dismantle pretty much everything you thought you knew about success and rebuild it from the ground up. And we're doing this using the brilliant, science-backed framework from James Clear's groundbreaking work, Atomic Habits. Listen, this is not about massive overnight transformations. No way. This is a complete paradigm shift about the invisible architecture of your daily life.
All right, let's look at our roadmap for today. First, we'll cover the math of tiny changes. Second, systems versus goals. Third, how identity drives behavior. Fourth, the habit loop. And finally, we'll wrap up with the 4 laws of behavior change.
Okay, starting with Section 1, the power of tiny changes, the math of success.
So we have this wildly pervasive myth in our culture that massive success requires massive, earth-shattering action. We somehow convinced ourselves that losing weight, or building a successful business, or writing a novel requires some Herculean effort that completely drains us. But that is fundamentally backwards. Think about the math here. If you get just 1% worse each day for 1 year, you're going to decline almost all the way down to 0. But if you manage to get just 1% better each day for 1 year, the exponential math is totally staggering. You actually end up nearly 37 times better by the time you're done. 37 times. There's this famous story from the source text about the British cycling team. For literally decades, they were the absolute laughingstock of the cycling world. I mean, they were doing terribly. Then they brought in this new coach named Dave Brailsford, and he came in with a relentless commitment to a concept he called the aggregation of marginal gains. He didn't come in looking for one massive sweeping overhaul. Instead, he just broke down every single little thing that goes into riding a bike. We're talking the ergonomics of the seat, testing different massage gels for muscle recovery, even having the riders bring their own specific mattresses to hotels so they could get slightly better sleep. He improved each of these tiny things by just 1%, and when you string all those microscopic 1% improvements together, the results were historic. They completely dominated the Olympics and the Tour de France.
And that brings us to a really foundational concept. Habits are the compound interest of self-improvement. Just like your money multiplies through compound interest in a savings account, the seemingly insignificant effects of your daily habits multiply as you repeat them over time. Now, the trick here is that on any given Tuesday, eating a salad doesn't suddenly make you fit, right? And saving $10 doesn't magically make you a millionaire. Because the results are delayed, it is incredibly easy to just dismiss these small actions. In fact, the text refers to the early stages of this process as the valley of disappointment. We all expect our progress to be this nice, straight, linear line. But the most powerful outcomes are actually heavily delayed. You have to persist with your tiny habits long enough to break through what's called the plateau of latent potential. That's where the magic actually happens.
To really get a visceral sense of this compounding effect, think about this powerful analogy. Imagine you're sitting on a plane flying out of Los Angeles heading for New York. If the pilot adjusts the heading just 3.5 degrees south, which is a shift of mere feet at the nose of the plane, literally barely noticeable when you're taking off, that tiny little trajectory change, when magnified across the entire United States, will cause that plane to land in Washington, D.C. instead of New York. The point is, repeating tiny 1% errors or 1% wins on a daily basis will completely alter your final destination in life. Honestly, you should be far more concerned with your current trajectory than with whatever your current results happen to be.
Moving right along to Section 2. Forget goals, focus on systems. The paradigm shift. All right, so here is our first major mindset shift. If you want better results, you actually need to completely forget about setting goals. I know, it sounds crazy, but fixating on the finish line is actually holding you back. Goals are all about the results you want to achieve, sure, but systems? Systems are about the continuous processes that actually lead to those results. The text highlights a massive problem with goal setting, and it's called survivorship bias. We look at the people who win at life, the gold medal Olympians, the wildly successful CEOs, and we naturally assume that their big, ambitious goals are what led to their success. But we completely ignore the fact that the people who lost had the exact same goals. Every single candidate applying for a job wants the job. Every athlete at the Olympics wants the gold medal. So if the winners and the losers share the exact same goals, the goal itself absolutely cannot be what differentiates them, right? The true differentiator is the system of continuous small improvements that the winners actually implemented.
Which leads us to one of the most hard-hitting truths in this entire explainer. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Think about it. Achieving a goal only changes your life for a fleeting moment. Say you have a totally messy room and you suddenly summon this burst of motivation to clean it. Awesome, you have a clean room, for now. But if you don't change the sloppy, everyday habits that led to the mess in the first place, guess what? The clutter just returns a week later. You treated a symptom without addressing the root cause. We absolutely must fix our inputs. If we do that, the outputs will literally fix themselves.
Let's dive into Section 3. Identity drives your behavior, the deepest layer.
So now that we've shifted our focus from goals over to systems, let's journey even deeper into the actual psychology of habit formation. We need to figure out where lasting behavior change actually starts. Change basically happens in layers, kind of like an onion. The outermost layer is changing your outcomes, your results, hitting the target. The middle layer is changing your process, your daily systems and your habits. But the deepest, absolute core layer, that is changing your identity. We're talking about your underlying beliefs, your self-image, your entire worldview. The problem is, most people try to create change by focusing entirely on that outer layer, just staring at what they want to achieve. But for change to actually stick around, you have to reach that core identity.
There's a perfect contrast between these two approaches. With outcome-based habits, you're looking inward from the outside, focusing on what you want to achieve. Imagine two different people, both trying to resist a cigarette. The first person gets offered one and says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." That is a classic outcome-based response. Deep down, they still believe they are a smoker who is just trying to be something else. Now, consider the identity-based habit. The second person declines and simply says, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." It sounds like a really small distinction, right? But it signals a massive foundational shift in identity. Behavior that doesn't align with your core self just won't last. You have to start by focusing on who you wish to become, not just what you want to do.
Ultimately, the purest form of intrinsic motivation is when a habit actually becomes a part of your identity. The goal isn't just to read one book, the goal is to become a reader. The goal isn't to drag yourself through a marathon, it's to actually become a runner. But that raises a big question. How do we actually form this new identity? Well, your identity isn't set in stone. It actually emerges directly out of your habits. Think of it like a political election. Every single small action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. As those little votes build up over time, the evidence of your new identity builds up too. This is exactly why those small atomic habits matter so deeply. They aren't just giving you tiny results, they are literally providing the hard evidence that you are becoming someone entirely new.
Which brings us to Section 4, the 4-step habit loop, the mechanics of the mind.
All right, so our underlying philosophy and our worldview have officially been upgraded. But to actually put all of this into practice, we need to shift gears from philosophy over to pure mechanics. Basically, we need an operator's manual for the human brain. This specific 4-step sequence we're about to cover is the absolute backbone of every single habit you have, whether it's a good one or a terrible one. Your brain runs through this exact linear order every single time you perform an automated behavior. It's the fundamental, universal loop of human behavior. You try something, you fail, you learn, and you try differently.
Let's quickly walk through these 4 steps. First up, there is the cue. The cue is just a bit of information that predicts a reward. It's the trigger that tells your brain to initiate a behavior. Second is the craving. This is your motivational force. Interestingly, you don't actually crave the habit itself, you crave the change in your internal state that the habit delivers. Third is the response. This is the actual habit you perform, and whether you do it or not is heavily influenced by how much friction is in your way. And finally, the reward. Rewards satisfy our cravings, and crucially, they teach our brains which actions are actually worth remembering for the future. If a behavior falls short in literally any of these 4 stages, it simply will not become a habit.
Let's rapidly connect this abstract psychological loop to your everyday life. Think about this incredibly common scenario. Your phone buzzes with a text message. That's your cue. Instantly, you want to learn what the message says. That's the craving. So you grab your phone and open it up. That's the response. You read the text and satisfy your desire to know what is said. That's the reward. Boom. Grabbing your phone instantly becomes neurologically associated with that buzzing sound.
This split-second, totally automated process governs pretty much everything we do, from mindlessly checking social media to pouring that first cup of morning coffee.
And now, our final part, Section 5, the laws of behavior change, the actionable toolkit.
This is where the rubber really meets the road. We are taking that neurological loop and turning it into a highly practical, actionable framework so you can systematically design a better life. Because listen, this loop isn't just something that happens occasionally when you're paying attention. It is an active, continuous, endless neurological feedback loop. It is constantly scanning your environment every single moment you are alive. Your brain is always predicting what's going to happen next, trying out different responses, and learning from the results. So the million-dollar question is, how do we actually hack it to our advantage?
Here is your ultimate cheat sheet, the 4 laws of behavior change. If you want to create a rock-solid good habit, you just apply these 4 rules directly to the habit loop we just talked about. Step 1. Dealing with the cue. Make it obvious. You need to redesign your physical environment so the triggers for your good habits are front and center, impossible to ignore. Step 2. The craving. Make it attractive. Try pairing an action you need to do with an action you want to do. Step 3. The response. Make it easy. Look, human behavior naturally follows the law of least effort, right? So reduce the friction, cut down the number of steps between you and your good habits, make it foolproof. And step 4, the reward, make it satisfying.
I really want to spend a moment on that final law, making it satisfying, because it hinges on a crucial rule. What is immediately rewarded is repeated, what is immediately punished is avoided. The first 3 laws, they just increase the odds that you'll do a behavior this time. But that 4th law is what increases the odds you'll do it next time. Why is that? Well, our human brains evolved in an immediate return environment. Think about our ancestors on the African plains, making split-second decisions for daily survival. But our modern society is a delayed return environment. The payoff for going to the gym or saving for retirement is literally years away. To make a modern habit stick, you have to kind of trick your ancient brain. You have to secure an immediate feeling of success, even if it's super small, just to bridge that gap until the long-term identity takes over.
Which brings us to the end of our explainer today. And before we go, I want to leave you with a really profound question to reflect on. We've learned today that you do not rise to your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. We've seen the mind-blowing exponential power of compounding small, 1% choices. So I want you to ask yourself right now, what identity are you casting a vote for today with your microscopic 1% habits? Because every single action you take is just a tiny grain of sand on the scales of who you are ultimately becoming. Don't stress about making earth-shattering changes today. Just focus on building the system. Cast one tiny vote for the person you want to become, because when you finally master your habits, you truly master your future.